Hi, everybody. I'm Jeremy. I am, as Faustine said, I live in Berlin, where with my wife, Rebecca, we live in base Berlin, which is both our home as well as a community gathering space that is bereft of community at the moment. And we, like everyone else, are learning to navigate this new online terrain that we're involved in. Today we're going to talk about food. And actually, we're going to talk about the class. The title of the class is The Evolution of the Lamb, but really the title of the class should have been Food as Memory, okay? Because actually that's what we're going to talk about today. Food as memory. So before we start talking about anything related to Passover whatsoever, except of course this is intrinsically related to Passover, we're going to go into breakout rooms with a really simple question. What is a food that for you triggers a memory? And tell us about it. So you're going to go into breakout rooms. I'll repeat the question in a second. There should be 2 or 3 of you. And what you're going to share with each other is, what is a food that you have that triggers a certain memory? So we're going to take about 6 minutes to do that, to go into these breakout rooms. You're all going to get a request saying, can I go to this breakout room in just a moment? Click yes. We're going to say yes lots of times today, but definitely click yes. And we'll go into these breakout rooms. And again, what is a food that for you triggers a memory? And share that food and memory with the people in your breakout room. So take it away, breakout room master. Okay, thank you, everybody. Welcome to some new faces who I think weren't there before. I think people are still trickling in. Okay, can everyone hear me? Just thumbs up that you can hear me. Yeah, see lots of thumbs. I just want to see your thumbs. That was just a joke. Okay, I wonder if like a couple people might share something interesting about the memories that were shared in their session. Something interesting, something surprising. Yeah, Gabriella Levy, I see raising your hand.
Yes, hi. In our session, it was interesting because we have 2 vegetarians and 1 vegan, and and so it becomes challenging because many of our memories have to do, especially in the Jewish holidays, have to do with meat and with big feasting and all kinds of meat and bone, the zeroah. So we don't know really how to change these things, how to make them work with the veganism or vegetarianism. So it's a challenge, but at the same time it proposes us more thought. So we thought it was an interesting thing to share.
I thank you, Gabriella. That's amazing. And I want to point out something really special there of like, how do we continue to take on this food as memory as we change, as generations change? Because like those memories are still important, but obviously we can't fully replicate it. And that's going to come up in a little bit in some of the texts we're going to look at. Anybody else have something to share? Thank you, Gabriella. Just raise your hand, and if I see you, then I'll call on you. Yeah, Hana Shikova. And if I mispronounce your name, yell at me.
No, it was perfect. Actually, the funny thing in our session was that a lot of the foods were like really weird. Not this like specific mom, really cute, amazing food, but like tuna sandwich with crisps and Heinz soup from the can. And it was funny, like those really specific memories, not something you would like, just like funny things. It was really nice.
And I think that's really important also, which is like, it's not always what you expect it to be. I'll say like in my group, I said like a really obvious answer, my grandma's matzo balls, but like, it's not always what you expect it to be. That it's sometimes something slightly different that can trigger the memories that we're trying to go for. So thank you, Hannah. Maybe we can get one more. Let me scroll. Bob, go ahead.
So I just want to reflect that it seems from what we're saying is that even when we eat that particular food or even think of that particular food, it's not only the sensory delight, or in some cases maybe just taste, but hopefully delight of the food. It's also a visceral, emotional, sometimes even a spiritual memory.
100%. And thank you, Bob. Not only is that a very insightful comment, it's an amazing segue for where I want to go next. So thank you for being my plant in the audience, but not really. Anyway, so we're gonna explore some texts today that really have to do with food as memory. And in fact, we're gonna start with the oldest food memory of the Jewish people. And the oldest food memory of the Jewish people is the Paschal lamb, the Passover lamb. Okay? And this stretches back to some of our earliest days as a people. And I'm going to share my screen, but you all have most of the source sheet already in the drive. But I'm also going to share. I'm in the chat I'm going to share in the chat as well the link to the source sheet on Sefaria. So here is there's the chat. Okay. So there is the link to the source sheet on Sefaria if you want to follow along yourself. I'll also say, because of the way my screen looks when I'm sharing the screen, I don't have like a great view of who might be raising their hands. So if you have a question, just write it in the chat and Jesse will throw something at me through the internet that will smack me in the back of my head. We have that technology, folks. Okay. Thank you. And please feel free, if you have questions, write them in a chat. Do not hold back. Okay, so we're going to start off in the book of Exodus, Shmot, chapter 12, where we first get the commandments from God about this Paschal lamb, this Paschal offering. So maybe someone can read from verse 1 in chapter 12 of Exodus. You all have it on the screen, folks. No excuses.
I can read.
Thank you, Veronica.
Okay. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, "This month shall mark for you the beginning of the month. It shall be the first of the months of the year for you. Speak to the whole community of Israel and say that on the 10th of this month, each of them shall take a lamb to a family, a lamb to a household. But if the household is too small for a lamb, let him share one with a neighbor who dwells nearby, in proportion to the number of persons. You shall contribute for the lamb according to what each household will eat. Your lamb shall be without blemish, a yearling male. You may take it from the sheep or from the goats. You shall keep watch over it until the 14th day of this month, and all the assembled congregation of the Israelites shall slaughter it at twilight. They shall take some of the blood and put it on 2 doorposts and the lintel of the houses in which they are to eat it."
Amazing. Thank you, Veronica. Veronica, does anything jump out to you about this passage about the lamb?
So as I was reading it, I was not really focusing so much on the content.
I totally hear that. I think,
give me some time.
Yeah, what is the question, Faustine?
From Galadriel and Oscar, they're asking, what is a blemished lamb?
Oh, a blemished lamb. A blemished lamb is a lamb that isn't perfect. Maybe it's got like only one eye. Maybe it's missing a finger. Maybe it has a scratch on its lip, which is actually a really important blemish that comes up in a famous Talmudic story in the tractate of Gittin, Kamsa and Bar Kamsa. But a blemished lamb is a lamb that is not perfect and whole, which means you need to bring a perfect lamb. I also want to say for people, yeah, go ahead, Faustine. Sorry.
I was just going to say blemished lamb sounds super Yiddish. Blemished lamb.
Blemished lamb. You know, but I do want to say it's almost as if my grandma is giving me the recipe. And she's like, you have to get a good lamb. You get a good lamb, you get a lamb, it's a first yearling, it's got to be a young lamb, nothing too old, nothing too young. It's got to be right, it's got to be perfect. You go to the market, you pick out the right lamb. You know, I hear my grandmother saying, if you get a bad lamb, it's not going to be good lamb. And here God is giving us this commandment. He's saying, you have to get a lamb. And by the way, you have to eat the whole lamb. Really, really important. And if your family can't eat the whole lamb, you better get some other families. And together, you got to eat that whole lamb. And by the way, the first commandment, according to the rabbis of the Talmud, the first commandment given to the Jewish people is in verse 2. This month shall mark for you the beginning of the months. We're not going to talk about what that commandment exactly means. But the second commandment is eat the lamb. The second commandment given to the Jewish people is eat the lamb. On Passover, you eat the whole lamb. And it's a really interesting question. Why? What's the whole point of this lamb? And verse 7 sort of gives a little bit of a peek. Verse 7 says, you take some of the blood and you put it on the two doorposts and the lintel of the houses in which they are to eat it. Now, spoiler alert for those of you who don't know the end of this story, but can anyone tell me what this symbolism with the blood on the doorposts, the blood of the lamb, is set to mean? Just jump in.
Something to do with the blood of the firstborns that are about to happen?
Dvir, you're killing it. Amazing. So yes, it's something to do with the blood of the firstborn. We basically, and I see some answers maybe coming in on the chat, but I can't read them, or maybe questions. But yeah, we kill the lamb, we put the... Yeah, go ahead.
I'll just read you the thing. It says that God will, from Gabby, that God will pass over the houses that have the blood.
Amazing. God will pass over the houses that have the blood, hence the name of the holiday, Passover. Boom. There it is, folks. This lamb, this is the Passover lamb. It is the lamb through its blood. The angel of death will pass over your houses and not kill your firstborn. And in fact, the specifications of how we're supposed to do that gets even more specific. Verse 22 says, you take a bunch of hyssop, you dip it in the blood, and then you apply some to the lintel and the doorposts. It's not just you put it on the doorposts. We're going to tell you exactly what brush you're going to use to put it on the doorposts. Okay? But then it gets really interesting, because verse 24 changes this from something we do once to something we do forever. Verse 24 is maybe one of the most important verses in the entire Bible. Okay? Chapter 12, verse 24. You heard it here first, folks. So maybe someone can read verse 24 through 28.
Yeah, I can. Oh, I was unmuted. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, you're perfect.
You shall observe this as an institution for all time, for you and for your descendant. And when you enter the land that the Lord will give you, as he promised, you shall observe this rite. Right. And when your children ask you, what do you mean by this rite? You shall say, it is the Passover sacrifice to the Lord, because he passed over the houses of the Israelites in Egypt when he smote the Egyptians, but saved our houses. The people then bowed low in homage, and the Israelites went and did so. Just as the Lord had commanded Moses and Aaron, so they did.
Amazing. This is so great, because you shall observe this as an institution for all time. And by the way, spoiler alert, the Jewish people still do. There's this holiday, it's coming up next week. It's called Passover. This is that institution. This is this davar. Ushmartem et hadavar hazeh. This thing, we're still doing it. We're still doing it years later. It's changed a little bit. We're going to talk about how it's changed. But this thing, this lamb, is still there. And when your children ask you, what do you mean by this, right? And by the way, in that one verse, we can hear the echoes of our Seder, the 4 questions, the 4 children, echoing in our minds. When they ask you, what do you do this? This is the Passover sacrifice to the Lord. Because the Lord passed over the houses of the Israelites in Egypt. This food, this Passover lamb, is supposed to evoke for us the memory of the Exodus from Egypt, that God passed over our houses. This seminal event in Jewish history, this great miracle which God did for the people, is remembered through the lamb. And in fact, it would be really nice to say that we got this commandment And then from that point forward in Jewish history, the Jewish people always ate this lamb, except something really funny happens in the Bible, which is it tells us how bad the Jewish people are always acting. The Bible loves telling us how bad the Jews are acting. And in fact, in the book of Joshua, which is the book in the Bible that immediately follows the 5 books of Moses. This is the one source that was not in the sheet that Jesse sent out. I'm so sorry, Jesse. Please forgive me. We're even now. Okay, so in the book of Joshua, it says that encamped at Gilgal, the Israelites have just crossed the Jordan River. They're about to enter the land of Israel. They're about to attack Jericho and begin their conquest of the land. This is after the 40 years of wandering in the desert. It says the Israelites offered the Passover sacrifice on the 14th day of the month toward evening. Okay, they're doing the Passover sacrifice. Everybody took a lamb. They slaughtered the lamb. They ate the lamb. But one of the amazing things you can do on Safari is if you click it, you can look at the commentaries. And here we can go into Rashi. And Rashi actually tells us here, yeah, by the way, this was the first time they did the Passover sacrifice since the first Passover. Meaning 40 years in the desert, no Passover sacrifice. Okay, so we're a little slow in the uptake here. We're still trying to figure out how does this tradition work. But after this, of course, now that they're in the land, they observed it every year. Except the book of Chronicles tells us that King Josiah, who's living in about the 7th century BCE, says Josiah kept the Passover for the Lord in Jerusalem. The Passover sacrifice was slaughtered on the 14th day of the first month. And actually, the commentators tell us, yeah, this was actually in the 18th year of his reign. The first 17 years, he couldn't get people to do Passover. Okay, so if you have relatives in your family, or if you have residents in your Moishe house who are like, I don't really want to do Passover this year, they're in great company with like the history of the Jewish people. But okay, there's this lamb. We have this lamb. This is the lamb. And sometimes, often, occasionally, from time to time, we're sacrificing it. But as time goes on, and especially in the Second Temple period, the first temple is destroyed in 586 BCE, and then the Second Temple, Dvir says, doesn't God command them to eat the Paschal lamb in the 2nd year in the desert? So it's a great question, Dvir. He commands them to commemorate it every year. But according to Rashi and the rabbis, they don't. They forget or whatever. They don't do it. Does God command them to do it? Absolutely. God is clear in his commands. But I know my mother and my friends and my wife command me to do things all the time. And sometimes I do it, but not always. So I think this is well within the realm of being a human being. Okay, so we're going to sort of step forward through history. We enter the Second Temple period. During the time of the Maccabees, we're certainly doing the Paschal Lamb. The Paschal offering becomes more and more popular amongst the Jewish people. And in fact, it turns into kind of a party. Like in the days of the Second Temple, everyone would, most probably the men, but a lot of people would come to Jerusalem, okay? And they'd camp out in the hills around the city of Jerusalem. Today, these are known as just other neighborhoods of Jerusalem, but back in the day, these were the outskirts of the city. And everyone's bringing a lamb. And they bring the lamb to the priest. They slit the throat. The blood pours out. Super graphic. Sorry for, getting even more graphic there with my hands. And then everyone's kind of having a barbecue. Everyone is roasting the lamb. And it's just this big, it's like festival. It's like, has anyone ever been to Burning Man? I imagine this was the ancient Israelite Burning Man. You were wondering, why do so many Jews like going to Burning Man? Now you know. You know, because actually, Burning Man is what Passover used to be like. Okay, you heard it here first. Burning Man and Passover, one and the same. Okay, so the Mishnah, which is the oral law, edited in 200 CE, the Mishnah describes exactly how you're supposed to cook the lamb. Okay, we got some specifications from God before, but now it's going to get even more specific. So can I ask for a volunteer to read the Mishnah in Pesachim? And this is the oral law about the sacrifice of the Paschal lamb. So if you feel brave enough to volunteer, just unmute and read. Thank you, Livia.
It's Emily.
It's Emily, but that's okay.
Thank you, Emily. I'm sorry. There's only one name.
How is the Pesach roasted? They bring a spit of pomegranate wood and thrust it into its mouth, right down as far as its buttocks, and place its legs and its entrails inside it. The words of Rabbi Yosei the Galilean, Rabbi Akiva says, this is like boiling, rather they are hung outside it. One may not roast the Pesach either on a metal spit or on a grill. Zadok said it once happened that Rabban Gamaliel said to his servant Tabby, go out and roast us the Pesach on the grill. If it, the Pesach, touched the clay of the oven, he should pare its place. If some of its juice dripped onto the clay of the oven and dripped back onto it, he must remove its place. If some of its juice fell onto the flour, he must take a handful away from its place.
Amazing. I love this passage. Thank you, Evelyn, right? That's your name?
It's Emily.
Emily. I apologize, Emily. Thank you, Emily. But this is an amazing passage, and I really appreciate you reading, Emily. It's got to be a dry roast. All right? You got to put it on pomegranate wood, and there can be no juice. We don't want any juices going around there. We need a completely dry roast. And this is really, really important. And this is really, really important because that's going to change as we go along. You want everyone is sitting there and they're doing a dry roast. Imagine they're spinning the spit to get it fully roasted on all sides. It's like reminiscent of like a roasted pig that I once saw at a Hawaiian luau that I did not partake in, but it looked interesting. So it is a completely dry roast. And this is how it was in the temple. And it was this fun, amazing event. Everyone's cooking it in exactly the same way. But something happens in 70 CE. And in 70 CE, the spoiler alert, the temple is destroyed. And so it used to be when Jews wanted to worship that they would bring their sacrifices to the temple, and that was the way Jews worshiped. But there's a problem after 70 CE because there's no temple. Do we still bring sacrifices? And even more than that, do we still bring the Passover sacrifice? And in fact, in the beginning, there are some opinions like what Rabbi Yoshua said, that, maybe we can sacrifice even without the temple and eat the holy sacrifice even though there are no curtains, and eat the regular sacrifices even though there is no wall surrounding the Jerusalem. And this is an opinion that it's existing, but eventually sacrifices disappear as a method of Jewish worship, which means no more Paschal lamb. The thing that our people have been doing for about 1,500 years, on and off, here and there, this 1,500-year-old recipe, 1,300 years, 1,400 years, whatever, comes to an end in 70 CE. So what are we going to do? What's the next step? And in fact, the rabbis have a next step, which is you're going to continue to eat roasted meat on Passover evening. And the Mishnah cites another custom, and it says in a place where people were accustomed to eat roasted meat on Passover evenings, outside of Jerusalem or after the temple was destroyed, one may eat it. In a place where people were not accustomed to eat outside Jerusalem, one may not eat it. Two distinct traditions develop. One tradition says, we still eat roasted meat on Passover. We're just not offering it as a sacrifice. And a second tradition developed, which is, how could we eat roasted meat on Passover without the sacrifice? It's like I imagine, I mentioned in our breakout group before about my grandma's matzo balls, okay? And, when my grandma stopped making the matzo balls, some people in my family said, now we must make grandma's matzo balls. And other people in the family said, no, we can't make grandma's matzo balls. Only grandma can make grandma's matzo balls. And that's the same debate that the Jewish people are having right here. Are we allowed to continue eating the lamb since we're not bringing it as a sacrifice? And in fact, these two distinct traditions that are going to be evolved, there's a fear involved in it. The fear is this meat is for Passover due to the fact that one appears to be consecrating his animal as his Paschal lamb and thereby eats consecrated items outside the permitted area. We don't want people to think that we think that we're eating the Paschal lamb. Because, by the way, once the temple is destroyed, the lamb that we're eating is not the Passover lamb. It's not the same one. This is a memory of that original lamb. It used to be that we were doing the exact thing that God told us to do in the Bible, But now we're just eating a memory of that. We're just eating a sort of visage of that, a reflection of that original lamb. So 2 distinct traditions develop, and Ashkenazi Jews, for the most part, develop a tradition to not eat roasted meat on Passover. To not eat roasted meat, okay? And we'll come back to that in a second, to not eat roasted meat on Passover. Sephardic Jews have a tradition, some Sephardic Jews developed a tradition to eat roasted meat. And in fact, Rabbi Yosef Karo in the Shulchan Aruch says, in a place where they have the custom of eating roasted meat, they should do so. And a place where they do not have the custom, they should not. And this is a decree lest one claims that it's a Passover sacrifice. And in any case, it is forbidden to eat a full roasted lamb in the evening because it will look like you are eating holy consecrated food outside of the temple. We want to be clear. This lamb that we're eating today, this meat we're eating today, is only a memory of the meat that we used to eat. And so we develop these new foods. We don't have the temple anymore. The way we eat this lamb has to change. The way we're doing this memory, the way we're fulfilling this commandment has to change. And in fact, it changes in a lot of interesting ways. It changes because we start to develop these ideas of, oh, okay, we need 2 cooked foods, even fish and the egg that it was fried upon. Chizkiah said in Pesachim 114b, the 2 cooked foods can even be fish and the egg that it was fried on it. And Rav Yosef says, one required 2 types of meat on Passover night. One in remembrance of the Paschal Lamb, and the other one in remembrance of the festival peace offering, which was also eaten on Passover night. And Ravina said, for the 2 cooked foods, one may even use the meat on the bone and the gravy in which it was cooked. This is a really important point. And this is something that's going to be more specific to the Ashkenazi Jews in the audience, so I apologize in advance. But most Ashkenazi Seders historically had egg, fish, and meat with juice. Brisket being a very popular option amongst Ashkenazi Jews in the United States. And I've talked to a lot of people this year about this text, and all of them had said, yeah, we have egg, and we have fish, and we have meat with juice, and none of them knew that this was coming from the Talmud. Because these food memories, they pass on. Okay, we forget some of the story, we forget some of the laws, we forget some of the specifics, but the memories of the food, they linger. They remain. But like some people mentioned before, things are changing in our food memory. Because my grandma isn't around to make her matzo balls anymore. And maybe some of us have different diets than we used to have. Maybe we're not eating meat. Maybe we're not eating fish. Maybe we're not eating egg. Does that mean if I've decided to become a vegan, that I can no longer fulfill this Passover memory? But the truth is, once the temple was destroyed, we couldn't fulfill it the right way anyway. And I think the amazing thing that happens is as the Seder develops, as this idea of the Seder develops, food becomes one of the central points of memory in the text. And actually, I'm going to ask someone to read, and this is from the Mishnah Torah, from Maimonides, the Rambam, writing in the 12th century. And he uses the word, and he's not using it, he's not the first one to use this word, but it's only a couple hundred years old at this point, this idea of the order, or the Seder. And so can someone read from the Mishnah Torah in Maimonides?
All right, I got it. The order of these commandments on the 15th is like this. In the beginning, we pour a cup of wine for each and every one. Recite the blessing, who creates the fruit of the vine, says the sanctification of the day, Kiddush, over it, and the blessing over time and drink. And then one recites the blessing over washing the hands and washes his hands. And they bring a set table upon which there are bitter herbs, another vegetable, matzah, charoset, the body of the Passover sacrifice, and the meat of the festival sacrifice from the day of the 14th of Nisan. And at this time, we bring 2 types of meat, one in commemoration of the Passover sacrifice, and one in commemoration of the festival sacrifice on the table instead.
Thank you so much. And I couldn't see it, but I think that was Gabby, right?
Yep.
Okay, thank you, Gabby. Gabby, if you don't mind, there's a lot of food here, isn't there?
Yes.
What are some of the foods that came up here?
Charoset, matzah, bitter herbs, an extra vegetable, and meat.
Yeah, all these different foods. And by the way, they're all evoking a different memory. Bitter herbs are the bitterness of slavery. Matzah is the bread that we ate. Charoset are the bricks that we used to build. This meat to represent the Passover sacrifice that we used to have. All these things are evoking memory. And in fact, the memory has stayed the same. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. The memory has stayed the same. We're still remembering the same thing. What's the thing we're remembering? Anybody? Open question. What's the thing we're remembering? I'll give you a hint. It starts with X and it ends with Otis.
You have some answers in the chat, Jeremy.
Oh, amazing. Slavery, freedom, or actually freedom. Exodus. Thank you. Yes, I did have answers in the chat. I apologize. Yeah, we're remembering. We're trying to remember this feeling of being liberated, this feeling of being enslaved and then being free. And a part of that is remembering enslavement, and part of that is remembering the liberation, and a part of that is remembering the freedom. Yetziat Mitzrayim, Nitzai says. Yeah, the memories are the same, but the foods seem to evolve. Just a little bit. We're not like doing huge, but like, okay, we used to eat roasted meat. Now we have to make sure not to eat roasted meat. But the memory is the same. Which means many of the people here might be preparing for the first time themselves the Passover meal. Huge responsibility. I will say I'm doing it this year. It is like I'm incredibly, luckily not a big crowd, but I am incredibly intimidated by not a big crowd. It's me, my wife, and my daughter. But I am incredibly intimidated at the idea of I am now solely in charge of like the food that we will eat at this Passover meal. I am in charge. I am a head chef. What are the memories I want to evoke? And for my daughter, who's not even 2 years old, what are the memories I want to start implant in her through this food? And so I want to encourage everybody. Veronica has a question. When was the Seder, as we know, invented? Akiva's time or earlier. So the Mishnah has sort of a proto-Seder when the Mishnah is about 200, 219 CE. So around Akiva's time, maybe a little later. Akiva's earlier, he's about 100 years before that. It definitely exists by the Mishnah, but the Seder as we know it today is almost identical to what exists in the Gaonic period in Babylon. But I have 2 minutes to end, so I have to get back to the point at hand, which is, what are the memories each of you want to evoke at your Seders? And how can you do it through food? So I want everyone to take a minute, and I want them to just write in the chat something they're going to make for Passover this year. Just share it in the chat. What is a food you're planning to make at your Seder? Charoset, lots of it. That's a good one. Come on, people, this is food. We're all eating. Hard-boiled eggs with salt. Knedlach. Knedel soups, ooh. Faustine wrote Gnepfele Alsazien Knedlach. Charoset, eggs, matzah ball. Matzah. If you're making your own matzah, then props to you. Gefilte fish, matzah balls, potato salad, roasted vegetables. There's a lot of things, veggies and dips, amazing. They're foods that we're going to prepare this year that, by the way, are not only going to be capturing memories of the past, they're also going to be capturing memories from this year's Seder. And by the way, this year's Seder is going to be one that you're going to remember. It's going to be different. What are the things you can cook this year that are not only evocative of memories from the past, but are laying the building blocks, the charoset of, as it were, of memories that you're going to build into the future? What will be your quarantine food that can become a new family tradition, a new family recipe, a new memory? So thank you everybody for joining me. You're welcome to continue berating me in the chat. I am really grateful to Faustine and Jesse and Eva and Lauren and the whole Moishe House team, whoever else I forgot, for allowing me to be a guest here today. And I only went 1 minute over, so that's amazing.
Difficult to follow Jeremy Borowitz, but I'll give it my best try. And let me introduce myself first a little. My name is Eva Schrut, and I'm the Director of Global Communities at Moishe House, and I've been professionally with Moishe House for over the past almost 4 years. And before working for this organization, I was also a resident of Moishe House Prague. And Prague is the place where I'm calling you from and where I'm leading this session from. Faustine was so nice to give me 30 minutes so I can share some of my ideas and also my passion, which is meditation and specifically mindfulness. Mindfulness can be described as being in the moment, being present, paying attention. It is non-judgmental and intentional practice, and I personally find this very helpful, especially these days where I'm flooded by so many news and so many information and so many uncertainties, and in a place where days can seem the same. I'm definitely far from practicing it for hours, and I myself use a lot of different applications to help me get there, because the most difficult part is to actually start meditating. Once you're there, I promise it will be easier. But just doing it now for 5 to 10 minutes per day, I can feel the difference. I can feel that I am less stressed, I am less anxious, and it really helps me. So the question now is how to use meditation during Pesach. And there are obviously many ways, and I'm not the only one who thought about this. So I was also using different resources that I will be sharing with you after this. But I would like to give you a taste of several ways how to insert meditation in this holiday, in Pesach, which in my theory is all about the spiritual and psychological liberation, which is coincidence, the same as mindfulness. And yeah, so as I said, I'll be sharing some of the resources after this, but also I'm here if you want to discuss something, and if you're planning to host or organize something, even via Zoom or YouTube or Instagram for your community, I'm happy to talk this through with you and give you some other ideas and help if I can. Now, I would ask you all to go to the chat box and just think of the way how you feel now and write one word that would describe how you feel at the moment. Okay, there are some people who feel great, anxious, connected, tired, privileged, quite well, happy, fatigued, frustrated. I don't know what exuberant means. Invigorated, interested. Okay, so we have a lot of different feelings in this room, and that's completely fine. Whatever you feel now, it's absolutely okay. And you'll be just looking into it and maybe seeing more of what are the feelings and what are the feelings and what are the the emotions that are coming through our minds and body. One more question, and now it's much easier. The answers are going to be only yes or no. Because usually when I do sessions, I have an idea and connection to the room. Now I have to kind of understand how to be connected to this Zoom room. So I would just like to ask you, answer yes or no if you practice mindfulness or meditation. So I just know what is the pace, and okay, we have no, yes, sometimes. Bit nope. I try, aspire to, no. Okay, great. Comme si comme ça, once or twice, actually, yes. Sometimes, amazing. So I just want to make it clear that if you practice, I hope that I'll be able to give you some other perspectives. And if you don't practice, I ask you not to be nervous, because hopefully this will be a good experience to try something out and to connect it with the upcoming holiday. So we'll start with one specific one, which is called physical body scan. And every year before Pesach, we are actually commanded to prepare our homes by getting rid of all the chametz, which is any food that is not kosher for Pesach, made of grain and water, which has fermented and risen, and therefore it's prohibited to be eaten during Passover. So we are commanded to get rid of this all chametz, to start fresh and clean, to sweep out all the gunk and crumbs. And we can do the same with our bodies, which, someone could call the home of our soul. In our bodies, we often store a lot of aches, pains, annoyances, stresses, and anxieties. So now you're going to do a little exercise that you could do with your community before Pesach and as you are cleaning your homes from chametz. Now, for this moment, you can optionally turn off your camera if that helps you to be in the moment for yourself. Take a moment to get comfortable in your seat. Feel your feet firmly on the floor and your spine be lifted as if you wore a crown. Relax your arms completely next to your body or on your thighs. Now, I invite you to think of a positive word or energy, such as love, freedom, or peace. We will be using this positive word and our inhale as the source of power and energy to sweep through our bodies and direct all the chametz out when we exhale. You may feel a warm tingling sensation or a sense of sludge as you do this, or you may not notice a difference, and that's fine. Allow whatever happens to be okay. So we will begin with just a couple of big, deep breaths. Breathing in through your nose and out through the mouth. As you inhale, imagine the positive energy, the love, the peace, the freedom. And as you exhale, imagine the chametz, the stress, the pain, the annoyance, as it is going out of your body. And as you breathe out this time, just gently closing your eyes, noticing how the body feels right now. Starting on top of your head, just gently scanning down through the body and building up the picture of how the body feels. Not judging, just noticing things as you scan from the top of your head down to your toes. Inhale with the nose and exhale through your mouth. If your mind starts to wander, it's not a problem. Just realizing it and get gently back to your body as you scan towards your toes. Few more deep breaths. Inhale through your nose and exhale through your mouth. And just finishing with your toes, we will take 3 last big breaths, focusing on freedom and our positive word. When we inhale, and anything reminding us of Chametz when we exhale. Now you can slowly, and only when you're ready, open your eyes. Notice the room around yourself and come back. Turn on your camera if you had it off. So I can just see that I have most of you back in the room. If you have never done a meditation, congratulations. This is your first body scan meditation. And this is something that I, again, recommend doing as you're cleaning your house out of Chametz. I would ask you one more time now to use the chat box and write one word on how you feel right now. So I just know and I can check in with you. Okay, there's light, better, calm, great, but more, calm, alive, intentional, calmer, relaxed. Okay, this is great. Eager for time to pass. Thank you so much for all the comments. Also, relax, the wind is blowing in my hair and your voice is so calming. Thank you so much. Cool. So this was one of the examples. I'm going to another one, which is, I was thinking about when you have the Seder, what you actually can do in the Seder, in the night, during the dinner, before the dinner. There is one thing that I was thinking about, and I will share it in my resources. It's when we are doing yachat, where we are breaking the matzah, you can actually do a meditation on matzah. But I wanted us to be more connected now. And as I don't know if everyone has a matzah now, and if not, you still have the time to get them. I was thinking about another type of meditation that you can do at the Seder. We have a lot of opportunities for meditation, obviously, and I decided to choose above the Yachat, Magid, which is when you actually tell the story of Exodus. And there is one small piece that I really like, and that's from Exodus 15, 20 to 21. I'm gonna read it for you. I didn't realize that you will be only listening to my voice, so I hope that It's okay. It's very short. And this part goes from Miriam and her tambourine. It's Exodus 15:20, and it says, "Then the prophetess Miriam, Aaron's sister, took a tambourine in her hand, and all the women went out after her with tambourines and with dancing. And Miriam sang to them, 'Sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. Horse and rider he has thrown into the sea.'" Now, there are a lot of questions on why Miriam had instrument and why all the women had instruments and why she was dancing and playing and singing in this pretty scary situation. My observation is that we don't sing when we are frightened or when we are sleepy or even when we are after a heavy meal. We sing when we are yearning for better times, when we are celebrating an achievement or anticipating a revelation. Now, a tip for your Seder: you could bring a tambourine and have people to think about something difficult that they had to overcome, and it was for the better. It resulted in bigger freedom or even better life. And this moment, when you ask them to think about it for a couple of minutes, you could just take the tambourine and play, even invite people to dance it off, to dance it through the obstacle that they had and they overcame. Now, I don't have a tambourine here, and I'm also a pretty terrible musician, so it's for the better for you. But I actually met a couple of years ago an extraordinary Israeli musician and drummer. Her name is Liron Meyuhas, and she's been to Prague quite, I think, like at least 2-3 times, and she always played for us. And last year she came before Pesach and she played for us, and she reminded me of this story of Miriam. So that's why I'm bringing it to you, because it was very meaningful for me to just listen to the drums and imagining of what I want to overcome, what I want to pass over. So I invite you now to just think for 1 minute if there is something in the past that you faced and it was difficult, but you have overcome it, what it was, and just focus on that. And I will play you the music. My favorite song, which is only tambourine and drums. So you don't have to be worried about, any words or lyrics being in the song. And we'll take it about 3 minutes to remember either something difficult we had overcome, something frightening, but as we finish the journey, even in the future, we know it is for the better. And if you cannot think of anything, don't stress out. You can just imagine crossing the Red Sea, listening to the tambourine, and going to a freedom. I would again recommend closing your eyes. And since this is the first time I'm doing this, I actually learned that on Zoom, you will have to adjust your own sound. So as I'm going to play the music, you will have to adjust your own sound. If it's too loud, it's up to you to turn the volume down. If it's not as loud as you would like to, just turn it up. And then I would recommend closing your eyes, your feet on the ground, your head as if you had a crown on it, and focus on your breath and the drums. And someone just tell me if you can hear. So now just take 2 or how many deep breaths you need. And come back to the Zoom room. This is another example, another meditation practice that you can use. If you're a better musician than I am, I encourage you to bring a drum or a tambourine or something to play with. And I wanted for you to have a little bit time to talk to each other in this session as well. So I would like Jessie to ask you to go to the breakout rooms, but it is just for you to reflect. And I have one answer and if you feel like answering in the small group, it would be great. And the question, sorry, not an answer. I don't have answers. A question of what is the liberation I'm needing right now? And just if I can ask you to split us into the breakout groups, it will be like 3 minutes. Hello, everyone. Welcome back in the main Zoom room. Hi. Just a second. Thank you very much. Thank you really, really very much. This was the first time I did something like this over Zoom for quite a lot of people. And I really enjoyed it. So I hope that you enjoyed it too, and that you're leaving maybe with some ideas on how to use meditation in your Pesach celebration. Or maybe just for yourself as individuals in this very strange world and time that we are alive, that this can help you. And as I said, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. I'll be sharing some resources via Faustine, who is going to send an email tomorrow. But feel free to be in touch with me. And I'm sure that you'll have yourself amazing ideas. But yeah, hopefully this was interesting for you too. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Hi, everybody. I'm Lauren. It's so nice to see all these faces and umlauts and other letters, symbols over letters in your names. I've never gotten to work with the European folks. I don't know, we're not exclusively European, but it's a pleasure to be here. Yeah, and thank you, Faustine, for inviting me to share. I love Pesach, and for me, the last few Pesachim I've had have lacked in a few ways. Really, one, because I spend a lot of my holidays actually with folks who are in jail, who are incarcerated, and to talk about people who are not typically included. I mean, these are certainly one group, and in terms of actually trying to help people feel free in a moment of incarceration, it's quite a task. And I think actually Jeremy and Rebecca maybe are going to be doing a shiur or something this week. I saw on Zoom about something like, how do we feel free as we're confined to our houses? A different kind of confinement, certainly. But for me, I have never, the last few years, I haven't had my Pesach with my friends or my family. It's been with the people in jail. And so when you don't have to have your own, when you don't have your own Pesach, the one that you're used to with the people you love, in that way, sometimes it can feel like you're showing a bit more than actually feeling. So I'm excited to learn with everybody here, because I get to share and learn with you all one of my favorite parts of the Seder, which is the 4 children. The 4 children, traditionally, perhaps it was the 4 sons. Now we have 4 daughters. And I know just from some people I've spoken to here that this is, for some people, it's going to be your first Seder. And for others, we've had many Seders. And so we're coming from many different places. So I want to be sensitive to that. So let's jump in. You all should have a PowerPoint that I put together. Although like Jeremy, I also edited mine. So I'm going to share my screen with you. And just give me a thumbs up. I'm a little bit new to the Zoom. When you can see it, give me a thumb up. Cool. Great. So I call this Midrash Haggadah, the creation of the 4 or 5 children. Midrash Haggadah.
Lauren, sorry, just a quick thing. If you want to put your thing in presenting mode, maybe we'll see better. You
Oh,
know how to,
I can, but it might shut off my thing. Is this better? Can you see better now or no? Still
yeah, it's good. Thank you.
good enough? Good enough? Okay.
It's perfect. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
So over. Cool. So the four children. Give me just like a few, like maybe a share of some hands. Like, what do people know about the four children? It could be something basic, and it could be I've never heard of them before. What are some things people know about the four children already? And just feel free to shout out because I can't seem to see everybody on this view.
Should we write in the chat box, Lauren?
Oh
or you
yeah,
want people to speak?
yeah. Am I able to
Okay.
see the chat box from here?
Yes, I think you
Yes.
can.
Okay. Great. Yes, please. Let's see what we got. You're amazing, Eva. We competed to be the wise child. Beautiful. Different types of questions. Okay, only I did. Different kinds of answers. Great. We competed to be the evil one. Wise, wicked, simple, small. That's interesting. Four aspects of our personality. So maybe not four different types of children or people, but actually all of us. Great. These are great. And I encourage you to keep writing these in. And actually, I can copy and paste this anyways, whatever people share later on, if we want to keep. Eva says they're often referred to as sons. I don't like it. I'm there with you. And we can keep some of these notes for later as well. So in today's session, so it sounds like there's some familiarity here. But not all of us know everything. And certainly I didn't even before preparing this. So I have three objectives here, and we're going to have some chavruta time. One is to learn the backstory and different interpretations of the four children. We have the Haggadah, but actually the four children didn't start in the Haggadah that we have. And in fact, even across different Haggadot, there are some differences, including in one whole set of Haggadot, the four children don't even appear. We'll get there. I want us to feel confident leading a discussion about the four children at the Seder table, perhaps by having one of these conversations ourselves. And then also to use the model of the four children to think about and practice inclusion integration in our communities. Okay, so here's my flight plan. And we're already perhaps just a couple minutes over, and that's okay. One framing introduction, a brief textual history. We're going to break out and look at different artistic depictions of the four children. Some of us are more textual learners, some of us are visual learners, right? This goes to the inclusion. And then we're going to talk about a fifth child, and then we'll wrap up. Okay, so just like a little bit of textual history, and also encourage anybody, like if you have questions, if I'm speaking too quickly, whatever it is, if you want to just share something you know or you've learned or you feel, just put it in the chat box and I'll be looking out for that. So in terms of where do these four children come from? We're going to get to the actual Haggadah text, but as some mentioned, traditionally understood, there's like a wise child who asks one type of question and gets one type of answer. There's a simple child. These are out of order, but there's a wise child. There's a wicked child. I know that's like the one that we always try to be or we try not to be. The wicked child asks one type of question and gets a different type of answer. Same thing for the simple child, and same thing for the child who doesn't know how to ask a question. And something to think about, certainly a little bit later, is like, are these the type of people we have at our Seders? Like, who's missing? And is this really a good sort of description of who's even here? But in terms of the sort of the backstory, where do these four come from? I would say there are sort of three steps of major development. One is the written Torah. So the written Torah, the Torah scroll that we have, not really sure when to date it. Well, I don't know, is it the traditional view of Revelation or is it the oldest manuscript we have? Whatever it is the written Torah has 4 or even 5 descriptions of how do we transmit the Exodus story? How do we tell our story? And it describes 4 children. It doesn't say that this is this type of child and there's that type of child. It just says, and when your child asks you, or when your children ask you. There's no description of, are they wise? Are they stupid? Are they silly? What are they? It just says when your child asks you. And for each of those, there's a different answer given. Then the sages, the rabbis of the Midrash, in the 3rd century and in the 5th century in the Jerusalem Talmud, they start to put together these different types of characters. And not all of them are the same. And they connect these questions to the answers. And we're gonna see that the questions and answers as they appear in the Torah are not the same questions and answers in the same permutations as they appear in the Haggadah, which is why I call this Midrash Haggadah, because, well, I'm going to get that. Yeah, thank you. Because the Midrash, because Midrash is a way of the rabbis either filling in the blanks or making things relevant or just offering their own interpretations. The Haggadah, if you notice, much of the text doesn't come from Exodus, the story of the Exodus. Much of the Haggadah comes from the story of Deuteronomy, which is the retelling of the Exodus story. So by nature, the Haggadah is a retelling of a retelling. And so the Midrash here, the rabbis of the Midrash are actually going to take what's in the written Torah text and convert it in a certain way to make it more relevant. And then finally, we have the Haggadah. The earliest Haggadah I think we have is from the 10th century. And the Haggadah, its description is even different from the one of the Midrash. So there's all this development. And the one that we have right now that we look at most often is this one. But in fact, there are some major differences that I think come to teach us something very deep about people and community. What is Mechilta at Hebrew? Meaning, what does it mean? Is that the question, Itai? I'm actually not sure exactly what it means. Maybe somebody else knows what it means. I can tell you it's the halachic midrash, the midrash trying to understand law, how to learn law from the book of Exodus. The Mechilta is looking at the book of Exodus and trying to derive laws from it. That's what the Mechilta does. What the word actually means is a great question. I never even thought about that. If anybody else knows. Can you also explain what midrash is in one sentence? Yeah, midrash is the rabbis making things relevant. I'll write it for you in Hebrew. Mitai, it's making things relevant. So looking into the Torah, saying either, hey, there's a question here, something's missing, or something doesn't make sense, or something is irrelevant. How can I reinterpret? How can I make a story to actually have this speak to me more? That's one way I would describe midrash. Another way of describing midrash is I would say as a love letter. As a love letter. If you ever receive a love letter from somebody, or if you look through old, family like letters, whatever it is, I don't know about you, but I know when I receive a love letter, first of all, I keep them all. And second of all, we look at every letter the person writes, every individual letter, and how they write it. What letters are big? What letters are small? Let's save the envelope. What does the envelope look like, right? What kind of stamps are used? What kind of drawings? What kind of colors are people using? Looking at the Torah is really, I think, how a lot of us look at a love letter, which is every single detail matters in trying to learn something from that. That's one way. Another way I would describe midrash is as a love letter or as trying to make things relevant. Okay. Any questions so far before we jump in a little bit to the text? Okay. Well, feel free to put them in the chat box, and then we'll go. By the way, we're not going to go through all of this, but these are just resources for you to look at in your own time. So I have here the Torah text, that these are the questions in the Torah, in the context of the Torah, that the questions are based on, and the answers, right? And so you have here in Deuteronomy that here's a green and green, right? The question matches the answer. And then, and typically anyways, okay, so this is the Torah text, my bad. This is the Midrash text, right? And then this is the Haggadah text. This is what we have. So can I ask somebody to just read through the wise question? I'm just going to call on somebody based on the names I see here, if I can identify them. Unfortunately, I can't see the names. Can somebody, Faustine, maybe can you call on somebody, because I can't see the names, to read first, just read through the Haggadah text here. What's the wise son? Right? And it says son, again. This is just based on the translation and based on many of the Haggadot we'll have. But again, don't want us to think only as sons, but as children or as people of any and all genders and any of all ages. Yeah, Faustine, can you just call somebody?
Yes, Sarita, you want to read? Thank you.
What does the wise son say? What are these testimonies, statutes, and judgments that the Lord our God commanded you? And accordingly you will say to him, as per the laws of the Pesach sacrifice, we may not eat an afikoman, a dessert, or other foods eaten before the meal, after the Pesach sacrifice.
Okay, great. It's a sort of a weird question, a weird answer. At your own seders, of course, you can talk about, is this really a wise question? What makes this so wise? How is it different from the other questions to come? But I want us to just notice that this question here in Deuteronomy 6:20, what are these testimonies, statutes, and judgments, etc., that the Lord has commanded you? Notice that in the Deuteronomy text, the answer is what to that question? We were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt, and the Lord freed us from Egypt. In other words, the answer that's given in the Haggadah is not the answer that's given in the Torah text. That's one thing I want us to notice, that the answer given in the Haggadah is different from the answer given in the actual Torah text. And similarly, we have here, Isadora, will you read for us this evil child? Assuming you're still on with us?
Yeah, sure. The second paragraph, right?
Yes.
What does the evil son say? What is this worship to you? To you and not to him. And since he excluded himself from the collective, he denied the principle of the Jewish faith. And accordingly, he will be blunt his teeth and say to him, for the sake of this did the Lord do for me in my going out of Egypt, for me and not for him. If he had been there, he would not have been saved.
Beautiful. And I think a lot of us at Seder's typically talk about this child, noticing that the evil one also says to you, the evil one says to you, and so does the wise one. So why are we so upset with the wicked one? Again, we'll notice that if we go back to the Torah text here, right, it says, what is this worship to you? And the answer is, it's the Passover sacrifice to the Lord. Yet the answer we give here is, again, very different. For the sake of this did the Lord do for me. So the answer to the wicked child, the question of the wicked child, the answer is different from the Torah. And I think there's something deep here. Because the answer given, if you notice in the blue, right, these are matching here, the answer given to the wicked child is the same answer that's given to which child here? The one who doesn't know how to ask. And this is, I think, a beautiful example of Midrash, where the sages are saying that actually they're hinting to us that there's actually not such a big difference between how we interact with the child who doesn't know how to ask and how we interact with the wicked child. Meaning that the question of the evil child might actually not be so bad. Right? Sometimes we just don't know how to ask questions. Right? The idea that it's not that the question is so evil from the evil child, it's just that they're very much like the child who doesn't know how to ask. I think how they decide to answer which questions and pair them up actually shows us a lot for how they see the individual children. That's just an example of looking to the original text and comparing it with the Haggadah and how there's some wisdom there. And here on your own time, you can see how this has developed, right? With a lot of the answers and questions being, differing from one generation to the other. In the Jerusalem Talmud and in the Mechilta, they don't have a simple child. They have a stupid child, right? Which is interesting. And also in the Jerusalem Talmud, the answers given to the wise child and to the simple child are very different as well. And here, and this is for you before we're just going to break out into Chavrut a little bit. I noticed some differences, major differences between the different children, between the different texts, and some guiding questions for what you might maybe want to talk about at your Seder or just to think about. For example, again, the Torah doesn't characterize the children as different children or distinct children. What do we think of the way that they actually describe these children? Also, the Midrash again uses the word stupid, right, rather than simple or innocent. Why would we in our Haggadah prefer simple or innocent to stupid? And then again, the differences between the questions and the answers and how that actually can teach us a bit about the children. I want us to read through the Haggadah and then just the last couple texts here, and then we're going to break into Chavruta and look at some artistic depictions of the children on our own in breakout rooms, and talk about like which child do we think is which, and what's the artist trying to tell us about who they think the children are. So Klaus, can I ask you to read just these two paragraphs here before we break into Chavruta? So we read about the wise child, right? A wise child asks about laws, right, and gets an answer about laws. The wicked child asks about what's this worship to you? What's this whatever it is, this worship? And he gets an answer about a story, right? He says, you are not going to be included in this story. And Klaus, can you read for us the simple and the innocent child? Or the simple
what does an innocent, simple son say? What is this? And you will say to him, with the strength of his hand did the Lord take us out from Egypt, from the house of slaves.
Great.
And the next one also?
Yeah, the next one too, please.
And regarding the one who doesn't know to ask, you will open the conversation for him as it is stated, and you will speak to your son on that day, saying, for the sake of this, did the Lord do this for me in my going out of Egypt?
Beautiful. And we could spend hours, I think, on this text alone. I want us to see that actually there are different ways of interacting with text, Jewish tradition. One is through text, but that doesn't speak to everybody. And in Haggadot are notorious, they're famous for having art. And so I've collected for you all, as well as a few descriptions at the bottom, different examples of the four children, which I think are very rich. And what I want people to do is I want us to focus on this one. And I say this one because I actually did this exercise with the folks in jail. And I saw this piece of text, this piece of art, in a way I'd never seen it before. So I want us to gather into groups of 4 or 5. I think Jesse's on top of this. And to look at this one. This is number 6, right, of them all.
I'm sharing right now the link to your presentation in the chat box.
Oh, great. Thank you. So you'll notice that there are a bunch of pieces. They're all brilliant. And each of them, by the way, for your own seders, I've included a description, sometimes by the artists themselves, sometimes by scholars, that describe something to notice about this. For example, in this one, here's the wise. This is the wicked. This is a simple. This is the one who doesn't know how to ask. You'll notice that the wise and the wicked, both are round, right? And the one who doesn't know how to ask and the simple are both square and triangle. This might tell us that there's something in common between the wise and the wicked one, right? That they're actually not so different after all. That's just an example. Somebody mentioned that the 4 were all made up of parts of each of the 4. That's here. There's the 4 daughters right here, which I think is also interesting, which one's which. But I want us to, as in Chavruta, to go over this one and to say which book is which child is which. Okay, and so I want us to do that for the next 7 or 8 minutes, and then we'll gather back together. Is everybody clear? Give me a thumbs up if we're clear on what the task is.
Lauren, can I just, sorry, in terms of time,
Yeah,
we have
please.
10 more minutes to go, and I really want you to get to the 5th child.
Okay, so we'll do for 5 minutes. We'll do for 5 minutes.
Okay, let's do 5-minute Chavruta. Great.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, welcome back. Are we all here? Great. So I'm going to share my screen again with everybody. I hope that in looking at this art, you came to perhaps use a different faculty, which is part of, I think, of the goal of the 4 children, which is to think about the different ways that people learn. Noticing that the wicked child, I think, can actually be any of the children. And any of these books, actually, right? Like even the one in the Hebrew, for example. What happens if you go to a Seder and the person just wants to do all the Hebrew all the time and doesn't care about, the different ways that people learn, or different, people that don't even know Hebrew? For example, I think in that sense, even just the Hebrew can be, in a sense, one separating themselves from the community. And with that said, I want to think about the 5th child. There are 4 children here, right? And a lot of people talk about how there's a 5th child, and that's the child who's not there. So I want us to sort of do in the next just few minutes that we have together, and I wrote a little bit more about this on the slide, slide 19, for us to really just think about who the 5th children are in our community, who's not there, or who is there but is feeling out of place and is not feeling connected and isn't worthy of being considered one of the children because they're not asking the questions. So I want to just I put some examples here that some reasons why somebody might not show up. Let me share my screen. Some reasons why one might not show up to a Seder, and perhaps some suggestions as to how we can include them. But I'm really more curious to hear from you. And if you ever identify as the 5th child and what speaks to you, or if you can think of who in your community is a 5th child, the one who's not even asking the question because either they don't feel comfortable there, right? They feel out of place, or they're just not even there in the first place. So want to think about that. So does anybody in the next few minutes that we have, any thoughts as to who's not at the table? You can put in the chat box, who's not at the table, and what are some ways that we can integrate them more? Right. They might be excluded by the group. Right. And also we can even challenge and say, maybe the fifth child shouldn't even be there. Maybe it's like, is this for everybody? Is religion for everybody? Is the Seder for everybody? Maybe not. I suffer severe FOMO. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Too religious. Ariel, I want people to keep writing because I want to take note of this. But I think, first of all, for Faustine said physical accessibility, and I think also in accessibility and thinking about people who are just too much screen time or people who have ADD and need to move around and can't just sit in front of a screen for a few hours. That's relevant for our seders. How can we integrate movement into our seders even from a distance? And Ariel mentioned the fifth children might actually be the elderly or those who are ill right now. What can we do to actually integrate them? And technology might not be so accessible to them. And poverty on the street, right, has to work, the essential workers. Somebody who doesn't even know they're Jewish. Does anybody want to share maybe just like one example of a moment of inclusion or something that you've done in your seders that we can learn from? And with that, we'll close to actually integrate somebody who might have felt left out otherwise. And you can just, just speak.
So in my family Seder, none of us or only one person in my group of family friends speaks Hebrew. So we do the whole thing completely in English. And it never becomes an issue because we'd rather read the story and like laugh at how it's written in biblical sense than just try mow through it in Hebrew.
Beautiful. Yeah. You're doing it in translation. And I would even say for those who want to maybe sing songs in Hebrew, doing it transliterated as Faustine said. So people, and I think for songs, at least sending recordings ahead of time. But Gabby, I just want to highlight what you said, that it doesn't have to be in Hebrew, right? The story is the story. And you also don't even have to do the whole entire Haggadah. You really want to speak to your audience. And that's both in terms of the selections, what you decide to do for the Haggadah and how long you want it to be. Do you want it to be an hour? Do you want it to be 30 minutes? How much of the food versus storytelling do you want it to be? But also think about the different ways that we learn. So now that we have Zoom, if you're going to be doing a Zoom Seder, it's a great opportunity to think about how can I use pictures? How can I use music and YouTube videos and other types of media to actually speak to the different types of children that are at the table? And for some people, you might just want to go with the text study. And I do happen to think that text study is good for everybody. But I think that it's really important to think about who's going to be at my meal or who am I going to be speaking to? And how can I do my very best to integrate all the tools that I have now in this opportunity to use Zoom to actually make the Seder a little bit different from past Seders.
I can suggest something that we
Nitai,
are doing
please.
in Israel.
Please, Nitai.
Yes, we are doing something very nice. I don't know if you do it abroad, but everyone at the Seder, who managed the Seder, it's my grandfather usually, he gives everyone a matzah. We need to read a chapter from the Haggadah, and he said to him, where do you came from? And I say, I came from Egypt. And where do you go to? I say, I go to Jerusalem. And they say, please read the Haggadah. So because this is some of the rule that he played, that every one of us at the Seder came from Egypt and came to Jerusalem. So as I was saying in one sentence, it's a one rabbi, the source of it's one rabbi, that some of his children entered to the Seder. And then the rabbi asked the children, where did you came from? And the children say, it's funny, I came from Egypt. And where do you go to? The child say to Jerusalem. And then many people at Israel started doing this at the Seder. Everyone I need to say, I came from Egypt and I go to Jerusalem. לשנה הבאה בירושלים הבנויה.
L'shana haba in person, or maybe by Zoom or by FaceTime. Thank you everybody so much for learning. I really encourage everybody to look through this and to look at how the development of the four children has really shown a different Jewish story, especially through art. And I welcome everybody to keep writing your ideas in here because I want to collect them and perhaps we can share them with everybody afterwards. So, Shana Tova and L'shana haba.
Hi, lovely to see everyone. I'll just introduce myself quickly. My name is Rebecca Blady. I live in Berlin. Together with my husband, Jeremy Borovitz, we run a program called Base Berlin, which is a project of Hillel, and we work with students and young adults and others to create meaningful community and empower people to build it themselves, kind of like Moishe House. So I'm really, really happy to be here. Thank you very much, Faustine and Jesse, for the invitation. Also, nice to see those of you I met for our Hanukkah retreat in November. Back in the days when we were gathering. It's really nice to see a lot of you again. I hope you guys are all doing well, no matter where you are, and you're feeling some element of comfort, even though this time is really, really insane. So that being said, I'm going to type a link into the chat. There you go. So if your chat is open, you should have a link to Sefaria. And when you click on that link, the title of the source sheet should say Eish Kodesh Pesach 1940. Yeah, I'm seeing some positive feedback. Thank you. Love the positive feedback. Oh, you guys have been on Zoom all day, haven't you? You are pros. Amazing. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We have about 30 minutes together. And so I want to bring some more of a spiritual perspective to one of the experiences I think that we're all having this year, which is being alone, but also not being alone. This strange middle ground that we're in, because there's a big common experience going on out there. And yet the sense of physical isolation can be really strong. And this, I've been working with a certain text for a little bit. The text is called the Eish Kodesh. Literally, that means holy fire. And it's actually the name of a book that was written by the Piaseczna Rabbi Kalonymus Kalman Shapira, during his time in the Warsaw Ghetto. He lived in Poland in the early part of the 20th century, lost his life in the Holocaust. And so when I think about this sense of like the world is radically different and uncertain and unsettling, my gut was to follow his Torah and his wisdom, because even though obviously his situation was totally different, it felt like a good lens, shall we say, to explore what this experience might look like. So to start, because this is, after all, a Pesach Let It Go webinar, we're going to anchor ourselves in texts from the Haggadah. So specifically, there are two short texts that both come from the same section of the Haggadah. That section being the Magid section, storytelling section. You might have heard more about that today, telling the story of Passover, and even more specifically, the texts about the 4 sons. We're going to look at 2 of the sons today. We're going to look at, there are 4, so just to preface, there are 4 sons: the wise son, the evil son, the simple son, and the son who doesn't know how to ask. We are in particular going to focus on the evil son and the son who doesn't know how to ask. And there's going to be specific reasons for this, but let's just get into it. Anyone would like to volunteer to read? Just shout, and I'll see you pop up on the screen.
I volunteer to read.
Perfect. Nitai? Wait.
Yes, Nitai.
Perfect. Okay. So I'll have you read the first text in the English. What does the evil son say?
I see you, I don't see the text.
I sent the text in the chat. I'm going to send it one more time. Does anybody who has the text right in front of them want to read? And I'll save you Nitai for next time.
I can.
Thank you.
All right,
Hi.
let me just out how to get back to it. All right, I'm back at it. What does the evil son say? What is this worship to you? To you and not to him. And since he excluded himself from the collective, he denied a principle of the Jewish faith. And accordingly, you will blunt his teeth and say to him, for the sake of this, did the Lord do this for me in my going out of Egypt? For me and not for him. If he had been there, he would not have been saved.
Thank you very much. So there's something going on in this text. And I'm actually seeing, I think Helena is here with us. Helena may have already heard this interpretation, so you are welcome to jump in or not as you choose. But there's something going on with the evil son. The evil son says, what is this worship to you? And the Haggadah says, he's saying to you guys, you Jewish people. But he's not saying for us. There is something very deliberate in the language of the evil son that takes him out of the collective, takes him out of the rest of the Jewish people. Says, that's your stuff. That's not my stuff. Anything that has to do with the Exodus and this miracle, okay, it happened, but that was something God did for you guys. Like, what is this to you? What is this worship? What is this whole thing? Like, certainly it wasn't for my sake, because I don't see myself as a part of this. And so the evil son takes himself out of collective, out of community, very deliberately, and even maybe a little harshly, although we can debate that later. Now, I would like to please ask for another volunteer to read the next text, again in English. Okay, Nitai, do you have it in front of you? You're on mute?
No, I see only the evil son. I see only the text of the evil son.
Okay, if you scroll down.
Okay, now I see.
Good,
Okay.
go for it.
And regarding the one who doesn't know to ask, you will open the conversation for him as it started, and you will speak to your son on that day, saying, for the sake of this, did the Lord do this to me in my going out of Egypt?
Thank you, Nitai.
Welcome.
Okay. So this one is a little bit different. The one who doesn't know how to ask. He or she or they, we don't have to be so gender prescriptive with the archetypes here. But this person doesn't know how to ask. So what are we supposed to do? We are supposed to start the conversation for them. And what do? We show how we experience being in the collective, being in the community of Jewish people all together. We start the conversation and we say to that person, for the sake of all of this tradition and worship and ideas and texts and thinking and people, for the sake of all of this, God did this for me. And it feels awesome, right? That's kind of the subtext. Like, being part of this feels so good. It feels like it was done just for me. And that's the model that we're supposed to demonstrate to the child or whoever, the person who doesn't know how to ask. That is the modeling that we're supposed to do. This was made for me. And therefore, the one who doesn't know how to ask will also have that experience. This was made for me. So now we have our basis. These texts that we say on Passover form the basis of a very, very deep lesson from the Eish Kodesh. And if you continue scrolling down on your source sheet, this Rebbe, you have a photo, first of all, The photo is from the original book that was put together of, it seems to me that it wasn't the rabbi himself writing it down, but people who heard his sermons writing them down. So you'll see here, this is the original text in the Hebrew, and underneath that, you have Eish Kodesh 1940, a text in English. And this, basically, is the commentary on what we just read in the Haggadah. So here is what we're going to do. And I would like everyone to split into chavruta, and Jesse is going to facilitate that for me, and to spend about 7 minutes reading this out loud together. And while you read this, I want to invite you to think about, what does it truly mean to count myself into the collective? It's a question that's really important this year, because even though we're all in different places, we all have to be so deliberate in asking, how do I count myself in this year? How am I going to do that? And so we have two models, from the wicked child and the child who doesn't know how to ask. And the Eish Kodesh is going to bring this together in a beautiful idea that really speaks to the level of the soul and the spirituality of this, and what that emotional and spiritual experience could look like. So that's the charge. If you have any questions, please write me in the chat and I will answer you. And if nothing else, I will turn it to Jesse to split everyone up. Welcome back.
Rebecca,
Nice to see everyone again. I'm sorry, was there a question?
Where do you came from? From Europe?
Oh, yes, because my accent. I am originally from New York, and I've been living in Berlin for about a year now.
What song? I didn't hear the.
Yes.
How many years?
About a year. Yes,
Cool.
I see a message that says, it always feels short, and I quite agree, especially because this is not a simple text. I'm going to ask maybe, let's say, 2 people to share in a very condensed form what your takeaway was from this text. Someone who hasn't spoken yet, if that's all right.
Something that came up in our group that I thought was interesting is like how originally we think that the roots are what supply like life force to the fruits, but when he flipped it at the end saying that like the mission of the roots is the fruits, it's interesting to think that like there's a threat to like the mission is the next generation, and if there's someone who's trying to separate themselves from the people, it's we need to get you back to the roots.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And I think
Rebecca,
it goes, oh, Faustine, yes.
Go ahead.
No, I think it even goes a step farther than that, which is that everyone can still be connected to the tree. And the branching out piece is a natural thing that's supposed to happen. So even in that process of falling down and separating from the origin, there's still this process of branching out from the root that is important. So I see a question in the chat that said that I think will be important here, unless Faustine,
I just wanted to attract your attention to the chat because I wasn't sure you were.
Okay, good. So I'm addressing the chat because I think that this will be important. Does it mean that you can't change from one community to another? What's happening during the transition? Okay, really good. Really good. Okay. So let's just break down the tree metaphor for a moment, and then we can address that question. So what is this tree metaphor? I think the point that Dvir brought up highlights beautifully what the purpose of my bringing this text was, which is that there is this idea that everyone can be connected to the root. Everyone can branch out from the root, but as long as there's this common root, which is what the author says is Nishmat Israel, the soul of Israel. As long as we can activate that on an internal level for each of us, We are all still part of the collective. Now, the issue with the evil child is that the evil child said, I'm not part of the collective, but we still need to include the evil child even here because he does the powerful action of naming that which he is not a part of. He names it. I am not a part of that. And therefore, he gives it importance. He acknowledges what a powerful community that is, that he is not a part of, that it's this, it's not mine. Now, all of us, I know I see the 5-minute warning. And I'm reading the chat. La, 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 la. Each child should be invited. Yes, yes, okay, okay. So what are we supposed to take away from this text in the short time that we have together to study it, to read it, to feel it? The power of this metaphor is that each of us, wherever we are the branches. And each of our seders, each of our holidays, as we put them together, are the fruits that are going to fall down from this. And we can understand them as separate from the root, but the truth is that they're not separate from the root at all. And so there is a way that I'm hopeful that Pesach can make us feel spiritually connected, just in the sense that people all over the world are doing the same action at the same time for the same purpose. This is what this author is calling Nishmat Yisrael, the soul of Israel. This is what we have to activate within us. Now, the question about, I don't think I addressed the question about transitioning to another community. Let's think about that together, right? If we have a fruit that fell from a tree and seems to be separate, and yet still has that same identity, that same inner soul, because that was the tree it grew on. But it kind of rolls a few feet away and joins another garden. What do we say about that fruit? Perhaps it joins another garden, and that's okay. It can flourish there and thrive and grow. But still, that inner soul is still possible to be there, because that is the growth process that it went through first. So does it mean you can't change from one community to the next? Does it mean you can't replace your soul with another system or code? I would never say never, but I think this is up for each fruit, each branch and each fruit to decide. Meaning that it's up for each of you. If this is a question weighing on your mind, I invite you to actually grapple with that. What does it mean to come from one community to the next, bringing with you all of that original identity and soul, and then to grow up, to do further growth in another garden? Both growth processes are valid. They both affect the fruit, and the fruit can still spread in both places. So I would actually say that is up to every individual person. Yes, and I see, yes, okay. Each child should be invited, yes. So this is my charge for all of you. I think Abraham Zimberg alludes to this a little bit. How do you make yourself count? How do you say, this is mine. This is mine and I am part of this. How do you say, despite all of the odds of this year, this was made for me and I'm still going to celebrate it and still feel like this miracle was done so that you could be in this position? And I actually think that one way that you can do this, and I'm going to close with this, is that all of the knowledge that you are acquiring today, that's how you're doing it. Nobody can take or replace the knowledge that you get for yourself. And so if you have knowledge about Pesach, any kind of knowledge, any level, doesn't have to be anything fancy, but if you have your own knowledge, this is something my grandma says, No one can ever take that away from you. So bring your knowledge. Bring the knowledge you have today, bring the knowledge of who you are and who your families are and where you're going, and bring it into your Passover. That's the way that you're branching out from the root. That's the way that you activate your Nishmat Yisrael, your soul level membership of the Jewish people. So that's what I've got for you today in our quick 30 minutes. I'm going to turn it over to Faustine. Thank you, everyone, for joining and for studying together. It's really a pleasure to see all of you. And be in touch if you need or have questions or want to think more. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Rebecca. It's always great to learn from you. As you said, we were with you in Berlin, which it now feels like it was a century ago, but it was actually 3 months ago, 4 months ago. It feels like it was another life when the word confinement didn't exist and lockdown didn't exist. It's great to see you. I will now move on to our last session of today's webinar, which I am leading for all of you. I'm really impressed that all of you are spending some of your Sunday afternoon to be learning on a webinar. I'm super thankful. If you've just come in, welcome. It's great to have you with us. Once again, you're all muted because it's complicated for everyone to spontaneously talk, but we're reading the chat. So if you want to be writing in the chat as this goes, feel free to do this. If you're in a place where you can turn your camera, no pressure, it's great. It adds flesh to this Zoom call. And I'm now sharing in the chat the sources for my session, but I'll also screen share. Let's see. Can you see my screen? Can someone just tell me a yes if they can see my screen? Cool, I see nodding heads, amazing. Cool. So I'll start I'll reintroduce myself. For those of you who weren't there in the opening, my name is Faustine. I work for Moishe House as the International Director of Jewish Education, which means doing this kind of things these days because we don't get to do in-person support. But yeah, making sure that we have the Jewish conversations we should be having for Moishe House people around the world to be building their communities. And I'll start by sharing something. There's probably similar things happening in the countries where you are, but these days in Paris, not sure about the rest of France, to be fair, but everyone opens their window at 8 p.m. and they clap and cheer for the healthcare professional who are like basically in one of the front lines of dealing with this pandemic. And the first day, we couldn't really hear it actually in my neighborhood. It was a bit frustrating to feeling that you're left out of something that's happening in the city. And the second day we could hear it. So we opened the windows and started clapping and it feels great. It's really moving. The day after also. And I will also say that in the next days, we see like a few people that are not really going to the window. One of the days we were actually cooking with my husband. So we're like, really? Like, do we need to go there and do it? And then we just started feeling frustrated because we're not taking part in this collective thing. But I think that, and I was wondering, like, why are those people doing this? It's very likely the doctors that I know are not at their windows at 8. They're probably either in a hospital or in their car going back home or trying to eat something after a super long day. So we're cheering for people who likely cannot hear this. Why do we feel the need to do this? And I think my interpretation, which is not very sophisticated, is that people these days need to feel some sort of connection, because you're physically alone or with 1 or 2 or 3 people in your living room. So you need to see those people. It's fun to see the people in the thing. Then you need to feel maybe some sort of meaning. If you're not a doctor, if you're not working in a grocery store, it's hard to feel like you can contribute to this situation, and it can be frustrating. So maybe by doing this, you're patting yourself on the back of that microscopic thing that you did. That was your contribution to this situation. So I think there's an intersection here of a craving for collective meaning, A, and connection, B, which is also a big Pesach thing, actually. And this is what my session will be about today. All those things of feeling part of something bigger, feeling connected. When I first planned this session, which was supposed to be happening in person at the Barcelona retreat, it all felt very new age. Like, yes, I can feel a connection. Yes, I can feel part of something bigger. And then coronavirus happened, and we realized that no, feeling connected and feeling part of something bigger and sharing a feeling with pretty much the universe right now is not that far-fetched. And we also realized that connection is a biological necessity, and it's also a psychological collective necessity. So I want to start by reading, I didn't do my homework. I didn't check where Mircea Eliade is from. I think he's originally Romanian. I want to start by having someone, a very kind volunteer, read this text written by this philosopher in the 20th century about what does it mean to gain collective meaning. Someone.
I'll do it. I'm happy to do it.
Thank you.
In our day, when historical pressure no longer allows any escape, how can man tolerate the catastrophes and horrors of history, from collective deportations and massacres to atomic bombings, if beyond them he can glimpse no sign, no trans-historical meaning, if they are only the blind play of economic, social, or political forces, or even worse, only the result of the liberties that a minority takes and exercises directly on the stage of universal history? We know how in the past humanity has been able to endure the sufferings we have enumerated. They were regarded as a punishment inflicted by God, the syndrome of the decline of the age, and so on. And it was possible to accept them precisely because they had a meta-historical meaning.
So I'm not sure I'll be using this idea, thanks Livia, of punishment as inflicted by God, but I want to explore this idea of meta-historical meaning and trans-historical meaning. Can we connect our personal living room, seder table, whatever confined experience with this larger meaning? And as I said, it's one of the big Passover topics. I'm going to explore this today through a very specific moment and gesture that we're commended actually to do during the Passover Seder, which is the idea of reclining, doing like this on the left thing. I don't know my right and my left. It might feel super anecdotal to be focusing on that one specific gesture. Like we're not talking about crossing the sea, we're not talking about all the cleaning, it's that one very specific thing. But I want to show actually how it's not. I want to show that this reclining, this very small gesture, is actually saying something about the Exodus story, about power relations. It's an affirmation of freedom, etc. And to get further deeper into the nerd zone, I want to explore it actually from a feminist perspective. And same goes for this. You might think of all the feminists, I see Emily cheering in her living room, of all the feminist questions you have, A, around the Exodus story, B, around Jewish ritual in general, C, about Passover, maybe this reclining thing wouldn't be your first priority. But I want to show that there's something super interesting to be seen in here. And I'll add about this that we'll be reading a lot of texts written by male people and men about what women should do and women should not do, how women feel and how women don't feel and how women should feel, which feels odd and feels like that fifth child that we were mentioning in Lauren's session. Where is the fifth child? Where is the woman in question? But what I do want to say is that all this I learned from one of my teachers, Rabbi Rachel Berkowitz. So as you're hearing, she's a rabbi and she's a woman. And I think that this is one of the beauties of the great Jewish adventure and the great Pesach adventure is that it evolves with the Jewish people. And one of the contemporary evolutions of the Pesach adventure and the Jewish adventure in general is that now women get to learn and teach and share and enact those things. And this will also be part of our learning. In case you're distracted, I want to spoil my conclusion right now, so you all know where we're going and you can also join the journey with me before we move into the text. My theory is that the Haggadah is a story of liberation, but the Seder actually is a performance of liberation. The idea is not only telling that we are liberated, but it's liberating ourselves, like it's performing the liberation during the actual Seder. So this is where I'm going at, and we're now starting. Cool, so I'm going down to the text in Mishnah Pesachim. So the Mishnah is the initial body of what we call the oral Torah, which is the rabbinic interpretation of the Bible and translation into laws and how people should behave. Can I have someone to read this text, which might sound familiar because it's also in the Haggadah?
Sure.
Go ahead.
In every generation, a person must regard themselves as though they, he, she, personally had gone out of Egypt, as it is said. And you shall tell your child in that day, saying, it is because of the Yehovah did
good.
for me, what God did for me when I come forth out of Egypt. Therefore, it is our duty to thank, praise, laud, glorify, exalt, honor, bless, extol, and adore him, her, they, who performed all these miracles for our ancestors and us. They, he, she brought us forth from bondage into freedom, from sorrow into joy, from mourning into festivity, from darkness into great light, and from servitude into redemption. Therefore, let us say to them, he, she, hallelujah.
Awesome. And can you read that last line also from the Exodus, so from the Bible?
And thou shalt tell thy child in that day, saying, it is because that which God did for me, that I came forth out of Egypt.
Amazing. So if you want to write in the chat, what do we have to do? What is the commandment right here? Let me see if I can see the chat. Eva, can I ask you to read me what's in the chat? I cannot see the chat, I think, since I'm screen sharing.
Sure, there isn't anything new yet.
What is the commandment? What are we supposed to do?
To speak to your children.
Okay, speak to your children.
To
Read
regard.
the story, praise.
Mm-hmm.
See ourselves as we were liberated. Be grateful for yourself or to yourself. Or be grateful yourself. Enact it ourselves and show it to the children. Read as if you are the one leaving Egypt. Feel sorrow and feel joy. To praise,
Awesome.
loud, glorify, exalt, honor, bless, adore. Adore God. To continue to tell the story of how Hashem liberated us.
Cool. Great. So pausing you here, I want to explore the specific idea of Chayav Adam lirot et atzmo keilu yatsa mimitzrayim. One is obligated to see themselves as if they personally went out of Egypt. The word used in Hebrew is chayav, which is chiyuv. It's an obligation, and it's a very strong language for the rabbis. It's not a suggestion of feeling. It's not an inspiration. It's not an intention. It's a legal obligation. And because it's a legal obligations, it comes with legal ramifications, which is the second paragraph. This is why we're doing everything that we're doing. This is why we're thinking, praising, lauding, blah, 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 blah. It comes with a user guide. It's like, if you think about like the idea of Shabbat, it says like, keep the Shabbat. It's not going to stay that simple. It then comes with like hundreds of pages of user's manual on how to actually keep the Shabbat. What do we call keeping the Shabbat? Second question, why would you want to see yourself as liberated from Egypt? Why would you do this?
I can say about this and about the first question, if it's okay, that we say that Passover, there is two meanings. There is the historical meaning, that we need to know the story of our people, and there is nowadays meaning that everyone is at Egypt now. Everyone has its own problems, so everyone needs to know how to get out from him or her Egypt to be the people of Israel. So this is how we say today.
Okay, great. So Nitai is talking about empathy. Do you want to write other things in the chat? And if I can read it to me.
Yes, I'm going to read.
We have idea of empathy from Nitai. What else?
Because I don't write now, like, because I think that like it is, Lauren, maybe you can say how you meant it, but we don't, feel liberated at the moment. Sorry.
Yeah, we don't feel liberated at the moment, and maybe we are, and so this is an opportunity to really lean into that, maybe.
Yeah, so maybe an idea of keeping things under control. Like my husband read to me last week something saying like, people are panicking because they are called to stay in their couch. Our grandparents were called to go to war. So maybe putting things into perspective of like, yes, it's a very weird and inconvenient feeling, this whole confinement thing, but maybe let's keep things under control. Like there's our other slave situations that we have been through from the past. Okay, so maybe relativizing things. Okay,
There are
why
two
else
few
would you want to see
others.
yourself?
There's from Aviva, because if we were there, it would be us too. Because living experience something is a great way to learn, to read our lives into the text, and to
Connection,
give
okay.
the text breath in our lives, to
Okay,
feel the
connection
action.
meaning, great. Okay, pausing you here, and then I'm going to ask one last question. What are issues you see in, like, if you are to actually see yourself, if you are obligated to see yourself in Egypt, what are possible problems of this obligation? What do we have?
If you can repeat the question, please.
Yeah, sorry. What is a problem? Like, what can be problematic in trying to see yourself as if you were liberated from Egypt? How can this be challenging?
Can I answer?
Yeah, go ahead, Klaus.
Perhaps I never felt like a slave.
Exactly.
So
maybe it's preposterous. It's just not true. I was not a slave.
yeah.
What else?
There are other that we don't understand how to do that. Challenging if we are actually in slavery. It's hard. It's hard because we are in Jerusalem already. Like, we already came to Jerusalem.
Okay, yeah. Maybe there's a gap in the privileged situation that makes it hard to feel this thing. I thank God, and hopefully this will never happen to me or my descendants. I have no idea what the experience of a slave is.
Yeah, there is one from Karen saying, I feel uncomfortable feeling part of an extra special people that God loves above others. Challenge our own privileges.
Okay, so there is also this idea of election. I'm putting, that's definitely a valid thing, but I think it's a general thing in Judaism in general. I want to, in exploring this specific thing of feeling liberated from Egypt, yes, it's challenging because you know what? It's not true. I was not liberated personally from Egypt. I was born in August 1993, way after this whole Egypt thing happened. Maybe it's hard. Like, how do you get to this situation where you actually like have this feeling of slavery? Maybe
another challenge that
yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, another challenge that is here is you perceive yourself as a constant underdog, which can be a victim syndrome. And I also think that this can that's coming from David. And for myself, I think that trying to feel myself as if I was in Egypt, like, sometimes can cause a lot of other thinking and a lot of other problems in my own mental health.
Totally. Yeah, Mircea Eliade was talking about a transhistoric change that helps you have resilience. Klaus, can you mute yourself? Sorry. Thank you. That gives you resilience. What happens when you're at a point of your collective story when this is actually destructive and not like helping you? Definitely. So there's a lot of potential clashes in this obligation to experience versus what can actually happen. And it's this clash I want to explore, and I want to give options to potentially fix it, this cognitive dissonance, and how actually in this process we can actually understand the exercise and the essence of the Seder better. So I will ask a question. What are some ways we know, and I'm giving you a hint here, in which we display liberation during the Seder? Let me see if I can, you want to write some stuff in the chat? What are ways in which during the Seder we say we are free?
We drink.
We drink.
We sing. We lounge.
Awesome.
And we recline. The Paschal lamb, matzah.
Awesome.
Recline. We sing.
Great. Okay. So yeah, there's this idea that we have like, yes, sharing stories. Totally. This is an interesting one, actually. If you think about like the privilege it takes, like who shares the collective stories, who gets to be an actor in the collective stories, who gets to shape the collective stories, and who gets to share the collective stories. That is definitely an affirmation of freedom. And then think about it, that's very true. There's this big meal that you have with friends, and it's not just about like feeding yourself because you're in the first row of the Maslow pyramid, your needs yourself fed. You're making a big comfortable meal, you're inviting friends, not this year, or not inviting them in the main way actually. You're drinking a lot for sure, you're sharing stories, you're discussing, you're thinking, you're getting to express yourself, and you're reclining. So I'm sharing with you, this is a bed, a Roman bed that is actually in the Metropolitan Museum in New York. I never saw, I saw it when I was in New York, I think a couple of years ago, and it made me understand, like, because when you do this on a table, for me, it's not really comfortable. I don't know about you, but like, and also drinking like this, you're like, I don't feel super free, honestly, when I do this. And when I saw this, you understand, okay, this is what they had in mind. And this is actually because the whole Seder, as the way we have it, we're asked in the Bible to transmit the stories, to experience the things, and there are also things in the rabbinic work. But the exercise of the Seder is actually a Roman exercise. It's something that we have taken from the Roman culture, which is the banquet, the symposium, and we're using this Roman modality of the free Roman rich men, it's men, and using it to express our own freedom. So now that we've talked about those power statements and I started to hint at it, I want to go into Chavruta. So we'll have, what time is it? 7. This means I have another 20 minutes. Cool. So we'll go into, let's say, 12 minutes of Chavruta. I would like you to study the following 3 texts. So it's text number 5, text number 7, all the 3 texts that have questions under. They have questions to guide you in the study. Don't stay too much focused on it. Let's do it quickly. So it's 52 now, if we can gather back at 6. Just if you want to split people. And once again, I'll...
Can you post the link again to the chat, because you posted it before?
Can I ask you to do it, Eva, please? It's up in the chat.
Yeah. Okay,
I'll
do it.
Stopping the screen share right now. Cool. And Jesse, you can split us into groups. Thanks. Welcome back, everyone. 31 people. Is that everyone?
Good to be back.
Great. So we finished in my group on one of the participants saying that it feels weird. Like we've all been discussing of how like we're all the fruits, we're all branching out of that soul that we share, and we're all making memories, and we share something with our ancestors, and we share something with Jews everywhere, etc. And now it feels like we're adding those awkward footnotes of like, yeah, we're all, and then actually we're defined the collective in a very, footnoted way. And it's maybe not something we're comfortable with. So I'll start by the conclusion, saying that like right now, pretty much the adopted custom in both Sephardi and Ashkenazi, and I don't know about Mizrahi communities, is that women do recline. I've never been at a Seder, although most of my Sederim were with my family, and this wouldn't happen in my family, where women wouldn't recline, or women were told not to recline, or women shared a discomfort in, I don't feel that it's appropriate for me to recline, or things like this. But it's been a process of how we got to there and how Jewish women started reclining as much as any person sitting on those Seder tables. So you might have seen that there's gradually the appearance of this mystery character who's the important woman. And who is an important woman? It's not really clear in the texts we're discussing. Is it someone who's the daughter of someone important? Is she important because she owns property? Is she important because maybe she, like in her own right, is that a wild possibility that she's just important because of who she is and what she knows? So I want to trace a little bit of the controversy that happened basically throughout the Middle Ages until to the situation where we are right now. There's this rabbi called Rabbeinu Manoach, also called the Chizkuni, who was a French medieval rabbi in the 13th century, who defined an important woman as a woman that either doesn't have a husband, so this means she's the chief of the household, or she has a super rich husband, which means she has tons of slaves, so she's not actually, the slaveness in the house is deferred to someone else. She's like, this family is privileged enough. I know this is all very problematic to hear, just bear with me. So basically the multiplicity of slaves in the thing takes out the slaveness from her and to those other people. So she's an important woman. He also includes the possibility that she would be important for who she is, i.e. in this time, she's the daughter of someone important. She's not important because she's a doctor or she's a great artist or whatever it is. It couldn't exist, but she's important because of where she comes from. And then there's the Meiri, who's also a rabbi that was between France and Catalonia in the 13th century. He has this specific thing of she has no servitude in her wedding, which feels interesting. So it's either that she has slaves or it's a couple in which the dynamics is such that she's not in a relationship of servitude with her husband. It's not really sure. And then you have the Tosafists, who are also a group of rabbis who were in France in the Middle Ages, who start saying, actually, all women are important. What's interesting to think is that in the Middle Ages, it's impossible to think that all women actually were rich, that all Jewish women actually had slaves, that all women actually were daughters of important people in their communities. So it shows that we're legally switching from the idea of women as socially superior to women to that couple dynamic explanation. That we're trying to put in people's mind the idea that women, whatever the status of the couple is, are not in a servitude relationship anymore. Jewish women are not in a servitude relationship with their husbands. And the Rema, we saw it, women don't, he said in the text that was the third text that we had, he's saying women don't recline today because this is not how we display power anymore. This is how Romans did it. But right now, if you come in a living room and you see someone lying on the couch, that's probably because they're ill. That's probably because they weren't able to go to work today. The status associated with being on a couch, being lying on the couch, is not one of freedom anymore. So the Rama says women don't need to recline anymore to be displaying freedom. But then comes the Ravia, who's a later rabbi, also European, I don't remember from where, and he's saying, wait, that works. It's true that it's not actually how we display freedom today, but then why do men have to do it? If it's not a symbolic gesture of freedom anymore, then it's just fine if men should stop doing it altogether. And the Aruch HaShulchan, who's a Lithuanian rabbi in the 19th century, he says, yeah, the whole explanation of we've changed the way we demonstrate freedom, it's not really honest. It doesn't work. But we have to be honest with the fact, and the Aruch HaShulchan says in Lithuania, 19th century, women are important, women are liberated, but in the world where we live in, women are not able to see themselves as if they were important. Women are not able to see themselves as if they were liberated. And he's saying it's out of pragmatism, realism on how women see themselves that we're saying, because they don't feel liberated, they don't feel this in their blood, it doesn't make sense that they would be expressing this. It would be preposterous. And then fast forward to a few decades, centuries later, you've gotten to a point when the minute you started admitting this, that it was about how women felt and how families were able to see the women among them and women were able to see in their families, you've gotten to the point where women actually recline everywhere in Jewish communities, or as in most places in Jewish communities. What time is it? Cool, great, I'm on time. What I think is happening here and is interesting is that the initial process was saying, based on your status in your couple and your family, you have a certain status in your society, which will prescribe the way you do a ritual. And actually, this whole Pesach exercise of being obligated to see yourself as Egypt allows you to reverse this. It's forcing you and it's obligating you in a ritual that will help you see yourself differently in your family and to demonstrate a different attitude towards your family and your couple that will in turn enable you to display a different attitude in society. So I think basically that the modality of the Seder plus the injunction of feeling as if we were liberated from Pesach, it's the idea that it's worth anticipating, it's worth performing an idealized society where subservient or oppressed groups, or oppressed Jews at least, I'll leave it here, are injuncted to perform their liberation. They're asked to liberate themselves in real time. And if you think about it, there's certainly a lot of contexts actually where Jews have, and I'm saying Jews of all genders, have performed sdarim and have thus claimed their liberation in a completely oppressed situation. Rabbi Rebecca just made us teach a teaching from the Esh Kodesh. This guy is literally writing about Pesach and being liberated in the Warsaw Ghetto. I don't know how much worse you can get into not being liberated. And you think of all the Jews who were saying that night in the Warsaw Ghetto, we have to see ourselves as if we were liberated from Egypt. And I think you're saying like it's not just a warm, fuzzy feeling. It's a super challenging and tough and radical statement that wherever you are, you should feel it. And it's not like, I want to acknowledge it's not easy. This is not meant to resolve the idea that it's challenging to feel this way. I want to say it's super hard and also it's super real, this legal obligation. And sometimes we see the exhaustion of Pesach as I have to clean the whole thing, I have to prepare this whole thing, I have to sit through hours of thing. But I think this is actually one of the most difficult challenges of Pesach is that it's taking this very sentence seriously. How do you get to the point where you're able to take this seriously? So I want this year, maybe this is my suggestion for you, is the idea that you could use Pesach to reverse the pattern of oppression that you've been witnessing. So if you're a woman who's grown up in a setting, be it Jewish or other, where you didn't feel that you were a participant in their full rights, maybe this is something that can enable you to feel part of this, especially through the framework of Jewish ritual. And maybe, and I'm not, once again, not comparing the magnitude of the coronavirus with the magnitude of being a slave in Egypt, but maybe there's this idea that what you feel will prescribe what you are. And maybe this year we won't feel as open in our possibilities of choosing how we have Seder and what Seder means to us, etc. But I want to suggest that maybe as people who do Sdarim, we'll have this specific magic tool that enables us to experience our situation differently and to be able to take a different look at it and to own it and to take control of it differently. I think this is my conclusion. I have time for 1 or 2 questions before Jesse and I wrap up. Let's see, I'm opening the chat box so I can look at your questions. Is there a specific comment, addition? It's so weird to be teaching to a screen. It feels like a complete silence. I know you're all talking, but it's an intense feeling.
There was this question, Faustine, about not sure if it's just my Haggadah, but why then do we only recline on the left for the first 2 glasses of wine and not the next 2?
Wow, that's a great question, and I don't know the answer. Lauren, do you know the answer?
Saying why the left? Why left, not the right?
Why only 2 first glasses and not the others?
I'm not sure. Is the truth is the honest answer?
Well,
yeah. Well, I know that the second glass. Yeah, I don't know. Eva, what do you think?
No, there are some people saying that in their Haggadot, it is for all 4.
Yeah, and this is what we do in my family also.
Yeah.
Totally.
And then there was another question.
Yeah, Dvir is asking about Haredi communities. So I don't know. I've never done a Seder in a Haredi community. My sense is that, I mean, there's a spectrum in the word Haredi. Haredi means ultra-Orthodox for people who might not know. It's, first of all, to start with, it's frequent that men and women don't eat at the same table in some communities. So that would answer part of the question. I don't know what the theoretical answer is. What I found is that in Ashkenazi custom, it's optional for women to do it. And in the Sephardi custom is that women do recline, but we're talking anyway of customs. We're not talking of obligations, so that wouldn't totally answer your question. My guess is that it also depends on which Haredi community. Hope that answers some of the question with partial knowledge.
Faustine,
have one?
Can I comment something?
Yeah, go ahead, Isidore.
I found it quite interesting when we talked about the roles in relationships when it comes to Pesach and the role of the woman, the role of the man. For me, I feel like even religion institutes this same feeling of codependency, which is quite toxic for relationships, I would say. It's not only like menacing for the woman and her feeling of being oppressed, but it also gets the man into this headspace that he is dependent of the wife and vice versa. This is like my comment, like something like a psychology fun fact.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's an interesting addition that statuses are relative to each other, and regardless of the gender, like what's the question of like individual worth? Yeah. Thanks.
I can add if you want about the external Orthodox, that I have external Orthodox friends, they Ashkenaz, and they do the Seder all together. Then the women go to sleep after the males study the Haggadah until the morning, and then they're going to the synagogue to pray Shacharit. This is what they told me they're doing.
Interesting. Okay, cool. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, that's it for my session, which means we can turn to the conclusion of this webinar. It's already 6:15 here. Jesse, over to you.